So welcome to a season of lilacs at the Arnold Arboretum with our docent, Chris McArdle. I am Sheryl White, coordinator of visitor engagement and exhibitions here at the Arnold Arboretum. And with me is Amy Heuer, who will be helping to monitor questions later. Amy is our digital programs and content manager at the Arboretum. The Arboretum is a 281-acre landscape of over 15,000 plants, each with special stories. Today, the lilacs will get their place in the sun. With 416 lilacs of different species and cultivars, there's much to learn and admire. Chris McArdle, an Arboretum docent for over 3 decades, has led countless general and private tours. Her love for and knowledge of the Arboretum make her a perfect docent and advocate for our world-renowned collections. Chris learned under lilac expert and former Arboretum propagator Jack Alexander and took her place leading numerous lilac tours on past Lilac Sundays. Although we couldn't offer Lilac Sunday this year, the lilacs are still there waiting for you. In case a visit isn't in the cards, let's take Chris's tour and then look forward to her in-person lilac tour for a 2022 Lilac Sunday. I just wanted to mention that all of the images in Chris's PowerPoint, her slideshow, are of plants in the Arnold Arboretum. We welcome your questions. Please put them in the Q&A, and there will be time after Chris's tour for as many answers as we can get in. So now I would like to introduce Chris McArdle. She will share her screen and her slides with a season of lilacs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheryl. This is quite terrifying. While I share my screen, you might want to go to speaker view and minimize me. You don't want to be looking at me. I have safe houses set up all over the neighborhood in case the power goes down. So if I run out the screen, that's where I've gone. I'm sorry that we're not in the landscape, but there are benefits. A woman once asked me, why couldn't we have all the lilacs bloom the same day? And now we can, with each one looking their very best. And I'm just going to go forward one. There we go. I first visited the Arboretum on a public tour and afterwards ran into the visitors center to say how much I'd enjoyed it. The staff replied, guide training starts next week, why don't you come? I said it sounded like fun, but I knew nothing about plants. That was 37 years ago, and both proved to be true. I started out jealous on behalf of all the other trees in the Arboretum of the attention given to lilacs. Lilacs are hardly exciting in winter. But come spring and a walk through the collection following Jack Alexander, then the Arboretum plant propagator, converted me. Staff and fellow docents are so generous here with their knowledge, making this a wonderful place to volunteer. The Arboretum's first lilacs were planted by Benjamin Buzzy when he built this house here in the early 1800s. He bequeathed his land to Harvard. The college used the land and an endowment from James Arnold to establish the nation's first public arboretum. It opened in 1872, and Harvard appointed a young man of 31, Charles Sprague Sargent, as director. Here he is on the right in his 70s in this hand-colored photograph of 1915. Sargent had not excelled as an undergraduate at Harvard, finishing just 88th out of a class of 90, gives hope to us all, but was a great director for 54 years, publishing 14 volumes on the trees of North America, sending out plant explorers like Ernest Henry Wilson on the left, a Brit, I might point out, to add to our collection. In 1904, Wilson brought Syringa pinnatifolia back from China. This one here in the picture is a more recent accession planted 30 years ago. I once made some mildly derogatory remark about its scrawny nature to a group, not noticing Connor Guidarelli, the horticulturist in charge of lilacs, pruning a bush behind it. Connor leapt to its defense, pointing out the pinnately compound leaf, each leaf consisting of small leaflets, which makes this lilac so unusual. I quickly changed my tune, an amazing lilac. Pinnatifolia is the pollen parent of a hybrid lilac that also excites the Arboretum staff, Syringa diversifolia. Diversifolia meaning diverse or varied leaves, one long and 2 or 3 short ones. I know I sound shallow, but when it comes to lilacs, I'm much more interested in flowers than leaves. Diversifolia has large white blooms, inflorescences, at the start of the lilac season, but they quickly turn brown. For several years, a robin has nested in one, a nice quiet spot until Lilac Sunday, when thousands of people arrive. Luckily, by then, the diversifolia is so unattractive that they walk on by. Sargent came from a wealthy family. He was a distant cousin of John Singer Sargent, and he had many influential friends. One of them, William S. Clark, president of the Massachusetts Agricultural College, went out to Japan to help set up a college there. In 1876, just 4 years after the Arboretum began, he sent back seeds of the Japanese tree lilac. Each shrub or tree in the Arboretum carries a label, not always easy to find, but so helpful. This one shows the accession number, like all of them do, of the particular plant or batch of seeds given when it came into the Arboretum. This is the only accession number I have memorized, 1111. When the seeds germinated, the seedlings are given letters, starting with A, and this one came from the first seedling. The tag then lists the scientific name, Syringa reticulata. SD shows it was grown from seed. W, that it was collected in the wild, that's always preferable, and collected by Professor W.S. Clark. The common name in this case is common Japanese tree lilac. After 145 years, this tree is beginning to show its age. But we have a cutting, a scion, taken from the older one in 1990. And it was looking good last week, here on the left, complete with a robin. He kept singing despite me taking the photo. I live in Brookline and asked Tom Brady about the recent addition of Japanese tree lilacs to the Coolidge Corner area. He said that they made good street trees, not growing too tall, with splendid bark and huge flowers. All that he, Tom, our town forester, could want. The tree does not bloom until the end of the lilac season. So I took this photo of the flower from our plant image base, a treasure trove of staff photos available to all on the Arboretum website. Sargent laid out the Arboretum by tree family, according to the Bentham and Hooker system, so that a visitor could see the arborescent vegetation of the North Temperate Zone without leaving his carriage, as Sargent wrote. As well as scholarly works, Sargent sent out a bulletin of popular information, and in this he predicted when the lilacs might peak. This photo here was taken on a Friday, May the 23rd, 1908. And 2 days later, the Boston Globe ran the headline, Lilac Sunday at the Arnold Arboretum. The name caught on. And by 1917, Sargent complained about people picking the flowers, writing, without the protection of a special policeman, the lilacs would have been exterminated in a single day. In 1940, then director Donald Wyman used the bulletin to assure people that lilacs bloomed over a 5-week period, not just one day. But all the same, 43,000 people came for Lilac Sunday the following year. We regularly have 20 to 30 to 40,000 people coming that Sunday, though the days before and after are just as glorious and without the crowds. There are no lilacs native to this country. Elder Brewster sailed here on the Mayflower in 1620, and his lilacs followed on a subsequent ship. So the European common lilac has been here almost as long as the Europeans. In 1753, Carl Linnaeus assigned lilacs the genus Syringa. My spell check corrects Syringa vulgaris to syringe vulgarism. Syrinx means hollow tube, as in both a syringe and the almost hollow stems of a lilac. Vulgar simply means common. 30 years after Linnaeus introduced his binomial classification, a fellow Swede, Carl Thunberg, thought he found a yellow lilac, Syringa suspensa. This was corrected in 1804 by a Danish botanist who said it was a different genus within the same Oleaceae family and named the genus after the British horticulturist William Forsyth, which is why we in Britain call it Forsythia. After walking past the Forsythia, the first lilac up the hill is this Syringa vulgaris, introduced by Canadian Mary Blacklock and added to the Registry of Lilacs in 1953. I'm using the brackets to show the date the cultivar was first named or introduced, rather than when a particular plant went into our grounds. St. Margaret has 2 rows of 4 petals, so is a double lilac. It's wonderful. In 1940, 3/4 of our lilacs were Syringa vulgaris. But now our collection is much wider, with many of our lilacs coming from Asia, like this Syringa oblata. More than 1/3 of the Arboretum's entire collection comes from Asia, with many similarities between plants from Eastern Asia and Eastern North America, species that were once one, but have separated over the last 12 million years or so, becoming disjunct. Syringa oblata is so named because of its oblate-shaped leaf. The earth is an oblate, widest at the equator. It really means fat in the middle, not a term I want used about me. The seeds of this particular oblata were wild collected in Korea, but sent to a USDA facility in Cheyenne, Wyoming, hence its American-sounding name. In 1865, Gregor Mendel published his seminal paper on hybridizing peas. In 1870, the Franco-Prussian War halted business for a French nurseryman, Victor Lemoine. He used the time to experiment cross-pollinating plants within his garden, giving his chief attention to lilacs. However, his eyesight was so poor that it was his wife, Marie Louise, who painstakingly climbed up ladders, took a watercolor brush, and moved the pollen from the stamen of one lilac to the pistil of another. In 1876, Lemoine announced that he had successfully crossed a Syringa vulgaris, Azura plana, plana meaning double, with an oblata, and had named the resulting cultivar Syringa X hyacinthiflora, hyacinthiflora plana, quite a mouthful, perhaps thinking that the flowers looked like a hyacinth. He left few written notes. This hybrid stunned the lilac world, and me just a week ago when the flowers looked like this one on the right. Victor, his son Emile, and his grandson Henri introduced more than 130 new cultivars, often referred to as French lilacs. Look at the very different colors and shapes, including one of my favorite hyacinthifloras, Necker, and another, Louvois. Other lilac growers introduced their own hyacinthifloras. Here is one from Frank Skinner, a wheat farmer from Manitoba, who contracted pneumonia in 1911, losing part of his right lung, restricting his ability to perform strenuous farm work. While he was convalescing, he read books, furthering his interest in growing plants suitable to that part of Manitoba, where there are just 3 months without frost. Skinner came to the Arboretum in 1917, and Sargent gave him cuttings of oblata. Vulgaris he already had. When the price of wheat dropped in the late 1920s, he turned his whole focus to horticulture, and in particular to lilacs. Age 65, he married for the first time, and his wife had 5 children in quick succession, the children continuing his nursery into the 1980s. Jack Alexander told me that Accession has every desirable aspect of a lilac. This is Accession, which he introduced in 1932, Frank Skinner did. This lilac has blooms from top to toe with multiple inflorescences at eye and nose level. It's disease resistant, the leaves don't cover up the flowers, and it has good fragrance. Several of Skinner's introductions have Native American names, many just from Longfellow's 1855 poem, Hiawatha, such as Minnehaha, and here we have Pocahontas, as well as Nokomis, who was Hiawatha's grandmother. Last week, I forwarded this photo taken by my friend Debbie Levine to fellow docent and bird expert Bob Mayer. I headed the email Bird in Nokomis, but didn't notice that spellcheck had corrected it to Bird in Bikinis. Bob was somewhat surprised, but opened the email. In 1935, Skinner introduced Excel. My daughter asked laughingly whether it was related to the spreadsheet. I think not. This lilac has outstanding fragrance. Before Jack retired, he and 2 volunteers carried out a sniff test on lilacs. He took them from lilac bush to lilac bush, sometimes doubling back, getting them to rate each lilac. I followed up with a friend, Nelia Sargent, who is blind, trusting her judgment as she was not swayed by appearance. And then one evening I noticed this cyclist smelling the lilacs and enlisted him too. The results were pretty consistent, and Excel received the highest accolades of all. Tinkerbell from the Bailey Nurseries in Minnesota has a strong spicy smell. This is one of the lilacs that reblooms, like another in our collection, Bloomerang, such a clever name, flowering 80% at lilac time and another 20% later in the summer, but give me 100% in the spring. A Lemoine lilac, Miss Ellen Wilmot, was given a total 0 on the sniff test, but a fine lilac all the same. Color is important too. The blue lilac, by which other blues used to be judged, is President Lincoln, introduced by John Dunbar of Highland Park. The name refers to Walt Whitman's poem, Leaves of Grass, written 2 years after Lincoln was assassinated in 1865, and reads, "When lilacs last in the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early drooped in the western sky in the night, I mourned, and yet shall mourn with ever returning spring." I'm just going to take a drink of water. In a list of the world's best lilac collections under the heading USA, the one that comes first is the Arnold Arboretum. Little to do, I'm sure, with alphabetic order. Highland Park in Rochester, New York, with 7 acres of lilacs, has more lilacs than we, but it's the Arnold Arboretum that carries responsibility for lilacs in the nation's plant collections network. This network is a collaboration between the nation's public gardens and the USDA, with primary responsibility for a species, in this case lilacs, assigned to a particular institution, the Arnold Arboretum, which also covers 7 other plant species. Highland Park was, like the Arnold Arboretum, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and this lilac comes to us from Highland Park, introduced by Richard A. Phoenicia. Olmsted had finished his work on Central Park in New York when the Arnold Arboretum opened, and Sargent asked for his help in laying out the grounds. Sargent said he hoped to avoid the stiff and formal lines of the conventional botanic garden, allowing visitors to see the collections both in their scientific and picturesque aspects. Olmsted certainly agreed and wrote, "We want a ground to which people may easily go after their day's work is done, and where they may stroll for an hour, seeing, hearing, and feeling nothing of the bustle and jar of the streets, where they shall, in effect, find the city put far away from them." In 1882, Harvard University gave the Arboretum grounds to the city of Boston as a public park, but leased them back for academic purposes at $1 a year for 1,000 years. However, Harvard does have an option on a second 1,000. The blue stake by this lilac shows that it went into the grounds in 2017. Different colors for different years. Plants are given special attention for the first 5 years they're in the grounds, though truth to tell, lilacs continue to receive more care than most. Lilacs suffer from all sorts of problems, such as powdery mildew, leaf roll necrosis, oyster shell scale, and more. The names roll easily off my tongue, but I've no idea how to fix the problem. This is the title slide we used, showing one of my favorite lilacs, Hulda, taken by Ned Friedman, a great photographer, as well as our 8th director, who, like the first director, Sargent, sends out regular director's posts. You can sign up to receive them by email. They come with a short paragraph about a particular plant or a group, with 3 outstanding photographs each time. That's all you get. No fee, no requests for money, no selling your name to others. I love them, and so does my sister in England. Having registered for this webinar, you'll receive a feedback form, which you can fill out, no worry about decreasing my pay grade, with a link to request these bulletins and any other useful links to things that I've mentioned during the talk. The lilac Hulda was named for and introduced by self-taught hybridizer Hulda Klager from Washington State. I just might add that this is my favorite photo that I took. Brag, brag. Hulda married as a teenager and as a young housewife decided that bigger apples would mean less peeling. She experimented with hybridizing apple trees in 1903 and in 1905 turned to lilacs. She was so successful that towns asked her to name a lilac for them. City of Longview, City of Gresham. In 1948, when she was 83, the Columbia River overflowed and swept away most of her plants. But customers brought them back, cuttings, plants back to her. And 2 years later, she was able to reopen until she died aged 95 in 1960. Hulda is described as potently fragrant and low growing. It's a bushy plant, so excellent in shielding one against the neighbors. But if you want a similarly rich plant to put beside a doorway, then Sarah Sands, taller than she is wide, would be a better choice. This lilac was introduced by Theodore Augustus Havemeyer. What a splendid name. In 1943, 7 years after his death. That took me aback when I noticed the dates, but Havemeyer inherited a fortune from the family business, which meant that he had a staff to help him in his Long Island garden. They took care of his lilacs, helping register them both before and after his death. Sarah Sands is a favorite lilac, as is Charm, photographed here in bud by Kyle Port, our manager of plant records, another great photographer, and in flower by Ned Friedman. There are no records of Havemeyer having hybridized lilacs. That means intentionally making the cross. Instead, he clustered plants close together. Many of them he'd bought from Lemoine's nursery in France, leaving the wind and insects to do the cross-pollinating. Then he collected the seeds and chose from the resulting seedlings. Here is another favorite lilac of mine, Beauty of Moscow. It was introduced in 1943 by Leonid Kolesnikov. The name Krasavitska Moskvy translates to a beautiful woman from Moscow rather than the city itself. The buds are advertised as pink with an opalescent sheen, and I can just see the shining cheeks of that young woman. Kolesnikov started out as an amateur horticulturist, but his work cross-fertilizing double lilacs gained him such respect that he became head of the Soviet experimental breeding station for plants. Last week, I met a couple from Russia who told me that a 5-petaled lilac brings good luck. Marina had just found one and showed me her iPhone. Peter added that you have to eat it to ensure the good luck. They simultaneously assured me that they hadn't done so. Lilacs are particularly treasured in Russia, as I found when the International Lilac Society came to the Arboretum in 2017. Jack Alexander invited me and Colin, my husband, now a fellow docent, to join the group as they went through the collection. As we walked, I asked hesitantly how one became a member. Pay the fee, they replied, and Colin and I fished around in our pockets between lilacs and signed up. That led us to their 2018 convention in California and the small town of Idlewild, where a lilac enthusiast supplied schools, stores, and libraries with a different lilac each week. The International Lilac Society was started by Father John Fialo of Ohio, a priest, college professor, and lilac grower. He named this lilac after a request from the Blanche Sweet fan club to honor the silent movie actress. I've yet to meet anyone on a tour who has heard of Blanche Sweet, but plenty have admired the lilac. Fiala said he introduced this lilac, Athaline Wilbur, after a lovely lady who cherished lilacs. Her great-niece was on one of my tours, sadly not the year that Athaline Wilbur was the plant giveaway on Lilac Sunday for new friends of the Arboretum. As a public park, the Arboretum is open to the public free of charge, from dawn to dusk every day of the year, so there is no admission fee to help offset the costs. After I'd been a guide here for 20 years, I was made an honorary friend of the Arboretum. But for $35, you can skip the 20 years volunteering and enjoy all the benefits of being a friend, receiving the Arboretum newsletter, which comes digitally, or for $55, you can have it mailed to you in print. Using the card for admission to collaborating arboretums and supporting this ever-changing museum of trees. I certainly visit here far, far more often than any other museum in the area. And while the director may not ask for money when he sends out the bulletin, I certainly think that this is a great, great contribution to make. Funds are needed in particular for the campaign for the living collections, a 10-year campaign launched in 2015 to collect 400 new plants, not only for display and research, but also considered vital in protecting biodiversity. Lilac Sunday would, but for COVID, have been celebrated last Sunday, May the 9th this year, 3 whole weeks earlier than heralded in 1920. That is in part due to the increased number of early blooming lilacs, but also serves as a significant warning of climate change. I diverge from Father John Fiala, who not only introduced 78 new cultivars of lilac, he also, in 1988, wrote the book, Lilacs. It is so worth looking for a copy. It was republished in 2008, edited by Frick Vruchtman, another great name, and Frick Vruchtman was also a longtime registrar of lilacs. Breeding a lilac is one thing, and registering it is a whole nother. They are extremely particular about making sure that names don't overlap each other. A lilac that stops me in my tracks every year is this one. It was accessioned as General Sherman, but the staff soon realized that was not the case. It is now labeled undetermined hybrid. A visitor suggested it be named Syringa Jane Doe. I guess it would be Syringa Jane Bloggs in Britain, but the staff have yet to buy in. Jack Alexander was similarly surprised when he cultivated seeds sent from Beijing in 1978 of the cut leaf lilac. The seedlings did not display a cut leaf, a leaf looking as though someone has snipped around the edges with a pair of nail scissors. Jack realized that the cut leaf lilac in the Beijing Botanic Garden must have received pollen from another lilac nearby. Jack chose a particularly vigorous seedling and nurtured it for almost 20 years before deciding it was good enough to name. It was introduced in 1996 as Lilac Sunday and has lived up to that name every year since. It is a very popular lilac, available in the trade with long inflorescences, looking as good from the other side of the road as it does close up. a prerequisite of Jack's. And it has recently starred on a jigsaw puzzle. This would have been a better photo of Jack and the jigsaw puzzle had I asked Jack to stand in front of Lilac Sunday, but it was just too crowded there. Jack introduced several other new lilacs whilst he was here at the Arboretum. He and Peter Green of Kew Gardens in England had an argument over the parents of Syringa ex persica. Jack claimed they were Syringa oblata and, as shown here, Syringa protolaciniata. Peter said, prove it. So Jack potted up the two plants and moved them both indoors to avoid any other pollen around. He cut off the male parts of Kabul. A man on my last in-person tour said, ouch, and proved himself wrong. However, Jack, a Jimi Hendrix fan, was pleased enough to name the result Purple Haze. Sheryl, helping me select photos, said this one was just too hazy, then laughed and relented. Jack also introduced Foxy Lady, another tribute to Hendrix and his spelling. This was, Jack thought, the result of cross-pollination by hawk moths. Foxy Lady has had a tough winter, so just in case Jack is watching, I'm using photos from last year. Prairie Petite tops out at 4 feet, so is perfect for a small garden. This one here was planted in 2016 by then Mayor Walsh in honor of his mother on Lilac Sunday, aka Mother's Day. This lilac came as a result of experiments irradiating seeds at the University of Nebraska in the 1960s. 30 years and several generations later, it was introduced as a dwarf lilac. My husband, Colin, trained as a radiologist in Edinburgh. Several of his colleagues were keen gardeners and would slip seeds into the equipment along with the patient to look for new and unusual results for their gardens. So if you ever need an X-ray in Scotland, check the pocket of your hospital gown first. The Arnold Arboretum has an outstanding collection of bonsai and penjing, not on display during the pandemic, but hopefully returning next year. One is a bonsai of Prairie Petite, and Bert White, a fellow docent, asked whether a bonsai of a dwarf lilac was a dwarf to the power of 3, a lilac cubed. I'm not sure. At the top of the lilac hill, we have a field of lilacs with Esther Staley from Walter Clark in California. As I took this photo, a woman exclaimed, "This lilac sure takes the prize today." It did, but had tough competition from Bob Clark's Birchwood from New Hampshire, Lemoine's Necker, Skinner's Nokomis and Pocahontas, and a host of others. This field of lilacs is a wonderful spot to revel, or, as I noticed last week, to set up home. Thank you all, and thanks to Karina, Regina, and Sheryl, to the photographers, Ned, John, Debbie, Brian, Kyle, Steve, Danny, Sylvia. And it's not too late, as Sheryl said, to come see the lilacs. I think you can come the coming week through the weekend and still have plenty to see. And I've missed out so many lilacs. Perhaps if I'm invited back next year, I can do a whole different collection. But here's a map just showing you at the top of the map, when I find my pointer, is the Arboretum main gate on the Arborway. And you could, with luck, park here and walk down to the lilacs, or you could take the subway to Forest Hills and walk in the Forest Hills gate, or you can come in from Center Street. So many different ways to reach the lilacs. Down the bottom, we have the first lilac I mentioned, St. Margaret, the tree lilac, and you can work your way up here to the field of lilacs and go back through the Leventrit. Thank you all so much, and I'm going to stop sharing if I'm very clever. And we're back. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. That was absolutely wonderful. I certainly appreciate this. And although I've been privileged to hear it several times, every time I learn more, and hopefully every time my brain retains more. So I hope everyone enjoyed it very much. We have a lot of questions, so we will get to the questions. I think Amy has been able to answer some of the questions that were more general questions. So hopefully if you asked one of those general questions, you're great with that. And I'm going to start off, and I do want to say that if there's a question that Chris can't answer, or Amy or I can't answer, I think anyone who's registered will have my email. It's swhite@oeb.harvard.edu, but you probably have it on your registration. You are welcome to email me, and I will find out the answer for you if there's something we can't answer during this. So let me just look really quickly and try to get through this when finding the first question. I think
Make it an easy one.
I think the fragrance was sort of answered within it. But here's a question from Mabel. This is going way back to the beginning when you talked about, I think it's W.S. Clark. He's actually mentioned twice on the accession tag. Chris, do you know the answer to that? Why he'd be on there twice? I know as the collector, but I'm not sure why else he would be on there.
He was that on there twice, was he? I mean, it may. No, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I'm not sure either. We'd have to go back. We thought about that, but we thought it'd be too complicated and take too much time to go through the slides. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to go on to the next one, and there's actually a couple that, and then Amy Heuer will ask, but it's really about soil. And I do want to say that Chris, as much as she knows about lilacs, is not necessarily a lilac grower. So I would just say this is something I will just tell you very quickly, that lilacs do happen to like a more alkaline soil than an acid soil. They do fabulously in areas of the Midwest, particularly Michigan, where I grew up. They're very easy. Here we actually have in the past, I believe still do, add lime to the soil to bring down the levels in the soil. They need a lot of sun. And so if you're growing lilacs, what you want is as much of an alkaline soil as you can have, but generally, you know, pretty standard soil and a lot of sun. And also be sure that if you have lilac blooms, you have to be really careful when you prune them, because the buds start forming instantly after it blooms. And so you don't want to be cutting off the buds for next year's bloom. So you want to be very careful about that. You can cut down most shrubs, at least about a third, all the way down to the bottom. Lilacs can live for hundreds of years. So hopefully that will help a little bit. You could try the fire ash. And so I'm going to turn this over to Amy, and she will ask one of the questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on a sort of related note, so Robin asked, how do you propagate new lilacs from the shoots that come up in the ground around the main bush? Is this possible?
Again, above my pay grade. That I was hoping that we would have a horticulturalist. And going back to Sheryl, I hope everyone appreciates that my husband cut lilacs from our garden, and so he's not going to have those flowers next year. No, grafting is way beyond me, and if I said something, it would probably be wrong.
Yeah, I want to say that lilacs do typically sucker. It's possible, but probably unlikely that you can actually start new ones from the suckers, but you can certainly you can give that a try. Again, that's something you can ask me. I have wonderful access to a lot of horticulturists, so I can certainly help with that. And someone asked if the Jane Doe could be Paultherian. Again, that's something that we'd have to check. We have checked with the horticulturists about what that is, and they don't seem to know. So I'm going to pass this along. Lots and lots of thank yous and really, really wonderful feedback, Chris. So I'm trying to look through here. Maybe Amy can see the next question.
Yeah.
Having listened to Jack, who answered a lot of questions, I know that he said 6 hours of sun was sort of the minimum for a lilac. And he would talk about the 3Ds: prune the dead, damaged, and diseased out, and take a third at a time.
Yes.
That's the total extent of my knowledge of growing
That sounds
lilacs.
great. I believe Jack is actually here, so hopefully if he wants to put something in the Q&A, he can say, yay, Chris, and that's right.
Or not.
Yeah.
Go on, Amy.
Amy, lots of these are just wonderful, really wonderful comments. So I'm looking for questions. Maybe Amy's found one.
Yeah. Well, so someone asked about what is the darkest purple lilac, or what are some of the darkest purple ones?
I mean, that's why I like Hulda and Sarah Sands. I think of them that both of those, and Edmund Boissier from Lemoine. So Sarah Sands from Habermeyer. And Hulda, I was just going to say the grower of Hulda went out of my head, but it's of course Hulda Klager. So that was easy. So those would be my 3 rich purple ones: Edmund Boissier from Lemoine, Hulda from Hulda Klager, and Sarah Sands from Habermeyer. And I think Sarah Sands is pretty available. That's the other thing about lilacs. It's no use loving a lilac that isn't available.
Great. I think that might have, just for something that was had a good scent. I know you talked about definitely about plants that had a good scent, and was Charm one and Excel as well.
So Excel was one, and Assisipi, those two.
So Assisipi might be better because is Excel more pink than purple?
Yeah, not much more pink, slightly. Why somebody wanted more?
Well, they wanted, they were looking for something scented that was more of a purple.
Yes. Assisipi has just gorgeous color.
So the question that I have is, there are superstitions surrounding lilacs. Do you know of any superstitions? You're so good on the stories and the history and the anecdotes.
Only the good luck in Russia, that before an exam, and I've heard that actually several times from visitors.
So maybe this person, Gillian, actually said that folklore says it's unlucky to bring them indoors. So maybe what you could do is counter that with your 5. If you find the 5-petaled lilac and stick it in your mouth and go indoors, you'll be fine. Amy?
We've had a couple of people, I can answer this question, who were wondering how we could watch the program again. So within the next 2 weeks, it'll be up on our website. If you type into the search bar "watch with us," our videos come up, and you can also visit our YouTube page and see them all there as well.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to show off my t-shirt. I have a wonderful collection of Lilac Sunday t-shirts, missing 2 years. So
Right. And we actually had one for last year. And then, of course, as we all know, we didn't have Lilac Sunday nor this year, but next year we will have a Lilac Sunday t-shirt. So people who are collecting them, want to buy them, want to come, please come. So I know someone has mentioned that they enjoyed the Eastern redbuds, which are in fact fabulous out in the landscape. And I think she's mentioning this about the lilacs and not the redbuds, because the redbuds really early kind of for the most part of that lovely reddish purple color. And I think she's wondering why the lilacs are planted the way they are planted. It doesn't seem to be by color. And I actually don't know that. That would have been a good question for Jack. Do you know, Chris?
Why the lilacs are planted as they are?
In the sequence that they're in.
Yeah, there was a sequence at the beginning, and it's been redone, and I love having them. I love taking a photo of one color and having the next one be a different color, so I can differentiate between them. No, I don't know the decision about sequencing, and redbud is very distracting. It's across the road from the lilacs and grabs lots of attention. And so whereas I once felt jealous of the lilacs, now I feel jealous of the redbud, because sometimes it takes people away from the lilacs. Never happy.
And I do love it. And I think if there's something, I'm sure that there's something that Amy can answer, but I did want to say that Jack did put in the question. Yay, Jack, and hi, Jack. He's saying that one can propagate lilacs by division, and a skilled horticulturalist can root them from cuttings and by grafting. So thank you very much, Jack. And I will just say really quickly, the question above that, there is not a poster for Lilac Sunday, certainly this year. So sorry, maybe next year we'll see, hopefully.
Someone wrote in and is wondering if there are any lilacs blooming through the middle of June at the Arboretum.
Well, the tree lilacs, early June.
Yeah, sometimes they do go till mid. They do tend to, as Chris mentioned, they're great urban trees, and you'll often find them, lining streets, and they can go into mid-June with their flowers. They flower much longer. I wouldn't put them up for a sniff test because they have a very, very different fragrance.
It's been written up as musk, privet, or cat urine.
Yeah,
but it's
okay.
too high for me to smell.
Okay, all right. My email again, I don't mind doing this, but it will be when you get some feedback after you get your follow-up from this. My email, and it's Sheryl with an S. It's swhite at O as in olive, E as in extra, B as in boy, .harvard.edu. So anyone is welcome to email me for specific questions that we couldn't answer. There have been a couple questions about lilacs we might have. I can look that up if Chris has anything, or Amy has another question, or Chris has anything she wants to answer. I can probably check our database real quickly.
Yeah, so on the topic of late blooming lilacs, someone wrote in and said, any reason why many of the dark purple lilacs are the late blooming ones?
Huh. I wonder if that's even true. And not that I know of, and I'm thinking that that Hulda and Sarah Sands, the ones that I mentioned, and Edmund Boissier aren't that late. But that's a really interesting question, as people always say when they don't know the answer. And yep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We also got a question about why there are so many different scents and why some lilacs have a really strong scent and some don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Isn't nature amazing? The different scents. In the spring, the skunk cabbage in the Arboretum has a smell just like a skunk, and I wonder, did nature run out of smells? Why would they be so similar? And why should Tinkerbell have a spicy scent? Again, they're all questions. As I used to say when I led in-person tours, I know a lot about what I know, but I know nothing about what I don't know. And Sheryl, what were
Yeah, so I
lilac
just wanted to
season.
answer, there were a couple of specific questions about plants. One was if we had bloomerang, which I knew we did,
We
but
do, yeah.
we do. And also the Peking lilac,
Yes,
Syringa, we have both of those.
yeah.
Pekinensis, we have both. We actually have a number, I think 4 of the Peking lilac and maybe a couple of bloomerang. So
We
we
used to
definitely
have a really wonderful Peking, and it just became too old. And I've been watching the new one, and I think it'll make the cut next year. That it will be exciting.
Great. I don't know if there are any other questions that we have. I love that we have somebody here from Ireland. That's fabulous. Welcome. And one of our staff, actually, Karina Kremen, who helped put this tour together, actually is Irish, and she'll be visiting there in another week. So she can take some of this information back with her. And let me see if there's any other. Oh, I love this. Chris usually mentions this before, but Tom Brady. Okay, Tom Brady, Chris, explain exactly who he is.
He's our town forester. Poor guy. What a name to have. But usually on Lilac Sunday, Mother's Day, there's some bored son or husband escorting mother into the tour, and he's hanging back and not interested. And when I say the word Tom Brady, his head will will come up, and I've got him.
Great, great. I will answer this question really quickly. We don't have 2020 lilac t-shirts. We did have a design winner. Actually, we had a contest for our 2019 Lilac Sunday t-shirts, and we hope to use that design for 2022. And I just want to put in a plug that in 2022, the Arnold Arboretum is actually celebrating its sesquicentennial. We'll be 150 years old. So quite a long span of lilacs, from almost the beginning to the end. And I'm going to let Amy answer the one about finding a plant, and also maybe mentioning the Expeditions app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you visit our website, we have something called Arboretum Explorer, which is an interactive map of the Arboretum, where you can type in the name of a plant, you can type in a country, a date, all sorts of different search terms that you could think of, and you'll get all the results that are relevant. You can find that by clicking the search bar and typing Arboretum Explorer, or if you scroll all the way down on the homepage, you'll see a big sentence that says, view an interactive map of the Arboretum. If you're interested in hearing more stories behind plants and hearing more from members of the Arboretum community, I would encourage you to look into our mobile app that we created, which has tours and highlights plants throughout the Arboretum. If you visited, you may have seen the little kind of 4 inches by 6 inches white signs with QR codes on them in front of certain plants. Those are from the Expeditions app. You can scan those QR codes. It'll take you right to a page of information about the plant. Often there'll be stories told by staff members about it. So it's a really great way to get to know our collections. You can visit it in the landscape, and you can also just look it up on your phone from your couch as well.
Great, thank you, Amy. I think we're going to wrap things up now. I do want to encourage anyone who's in the area to come and visit the Arnold Arboretum, see our amazing plants, and absolutely you'll see the lilacs. They're fabulous right now, and will be, I would say, probably for another couple weeks, depending on weather. If it gets really, really hot, or if we have a hurricane, then they will go more quickly. But for another couple weeks, they actually should be in bloom. So it's a great time to visit. And for people who aren't here, find a lilac, find a daffodil, find a red bud, find a tree. Just go out in nature and enjoy it. It's really what we need these days to stay healthy in spirit and in mind. So I welcome all of you to just go have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Chris, so much. It was a really, really wonderful tour, and we look forward to seeing you in the landscape next year. And thank you, Amy, as well.
Bye,
Farewell
everyone.
to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.